You're listening to the Decentered Media podcast with me, Rob Watson. Conversations about community media. Visit decentered.co.uk or follow on Instagram and Twitter at Decentered Media. Hello, Rob Watson here for Decentered Media, and it's Saturday the 13th of January. This is the first podcast and vlog that I've posted for 2024, so Happy New Year. I had COVID over Christmas and I'm kind of slowly recovering from it, and I've still got a chest infection and cough. Just let's see how I get on. I have a hot drink of ginger tea just to hopefully smooth the vocal cords as I go along. And I hope you had a good Christmas and New Year's break. It was the television wasn't very interesting, and I spent most of the time lying on the sofa feeling sorry for myself. So lots of paracetamol and ibuprofen and plenty of sleep, that kind of thing. But it's nice. Today I've been out to get out for a walk in the sunshine, so it's been a kind of nice brisk January day today, and the sun's set now. So anyway, kind of what I want to talk about is something which has kind of been some of the projects I'm associated with and work with. It's a recurring theme, which is often something that we don't really focus on when it comes to most people's understanding of community media. We look at the way we produce media. We look at the kind of way we get people involved with learning how to make media, and we get people and how we facilitate discussion and conversations and how we inform our communities and as listeners and viewers and readers, those kind of things. But what we don't really talk about that much, and we maybe need to be talking about this more often, is the kind of way we administer the organisation or the group or the body that we've set up to work on these projects. So that's the kind of governance model and the way that we go about ensuring that what we're doing and what we're working with and on is run properly, it's open and transparent, and that there is a strong sense of accountability, which fits with and is aligned with any other organisation that is doing this kind of work. So whether it's a charity, whether it's a CIC, community interest company, whether it's an unaffiliated, unconstituted community group, then most people would want to have things like a constitution or a terms of reference and some policies, so that when people come to get involved and take part in developing the project, and that's what we're here to do with community media. We're not just a group of people providing a product for people. It's about enabling a space for people to come in and learn how this works and to add their contribution towards that. So park your egos at the door, your presenter-focused egos at the door. You've got to do the sums, and you've got to do the technical planning, and you've got to do the relationship building, and you've got to make sure that it's written down, and you've got to tell your partners and stakeholders and volunteers how this is working and what it's achieving and what the benefit is, so that you can build it up. And I think this is one of the things that's more generally with community media, it's it's less focused on, and certainly in policy terms, when you're talking about things with the Ofcom or DCMS, they see things very much through the lens of what goes out on air and what the role is for content. So the media bill, for example, bear with me a second. Here we go. The media bill, for example, is going to reshape the way that local independent radio, what we call commercial radio, is going to be effectively measured on, which is the provision of locally relevant news and information. But that can be created anywhere. That can be created in London. It can be the data can be scraped from online feeds, Facebook groups, Twitter feeds, any kind of data source. It can be put through some artificial intelligence data management systems, and then it can be regurgitated out as a form of local news and information. And if you think about the way that Google provides alerts for traffic information, it's perhaps replaced a lot of the kind of role that local radio used to play, and still does to a large part in terms of giving information out. And it might be better than the way that local radio gives out information, because it might be more accurate. It's driven by accurate, up-to-date data. And there's less mediation. It's the direct data. When you're planning a route, you sit in an Uber and you want to go from A to B, and it works out which is the best route based on the congestion patterns. So things are moving forward. Things are changing. I think what radio makes it has a different purpose. Excuse me, is the relationship that you have between the people providing the information and the people who use the information, and being able to feed back into that process. So if we distance ourselves from the relationship between the information that we get locally is provided by algorithms that are determined, I don't know, San Francisco, Google or Facebook or whoever else, Microsoft, this information, Apple, this information then, does it have its local relevance? Does it enable people to locally ask questions about, well, why is it like this? And we see this, a good example for this would be the controversy around low traffic neighborhoods. And it is a public matter of controversy in some areas. And people are being redirected onto minor roads, whereas they previously would have used major roads. And congestion is being has to be managed in a different way and anticipated in a different way, because when you're putting restrictions in place, the flooding that we've just had, for example, lots of roads were closed, but people sat navs. You don't know the area. The data itself doesn't necessarily know the area. Does it connect that, if people drive through a street that's flooded, and if it's got houses on either side with big gardens at the front, well, you can drive through and create a wave that washes behind you. If you drive through a terrace street that's been flooded and you drive through with no, fast, quite quickly, it will cause a wave that further floods those properties and damages those properties. And I'm not saying that radio can get into that, but it has to be part of people's meaningful connection with where they live. And what I'm worried about with the kind of homogenization and the centralization that the media bill is going to enable and introduce. And I mean, let's face it, it's already there in practice. This is just going to make it legislatively, the legal side of this will be clearer. And I think what we've got is a complete disconnection of what we mean by local. There is no, contrary to some of the myths that exist, there is no such thing as local radio. There is no such thing in legislation as commercial radio. What we have, the definition works like this: we have national radio, and then anything else that isn't national is defined as local, but it isn't given a definition of what that criteria for localness actually is and what it actually means. So people can say, oh, well, this is local, but it's not produced by anybody, by any standard or definition of practical reality. It's not made by people who live in my neighbourhood or your neighbourhood. It's made by people who are sitting in a server warehouse, in southeast England, and they're bespoking the content and adapting the content for use in other places. And the AI system can put a different accent on for, Newcastle as it can do for Liverpool, as it can do for Cardiff, or it can do for Glasgow. And this is really something that we've got to get to grips with. And the question is, why do we value local content? Ofcom are undertaking a review of local media, and I kind of get the impression that it's quite a limited. I need to look at it in a bit more detail, and I'll follow this up with a discussion that we might have fairly soon, because the consultation is in February, ends in February. But, what do we mean by local? And who determines what are local priorities? This is interesting because most of the government policy is either being challenged and changed around. We've had a supposedly Localism Act, which was about empowering local communities to make decisions for themselves. But we've had the Levelling Up agenda, which was again about kind of redistributing power away from the centre, and the proposals for the Labour Party, if they form the next government, are for a devolution agenda. But none of these things ever seem to include our media. And I think there needs to be, we're missing a trick here, and it's a real absence and a real shame that the media bill doesn't actually nail down what it means to be local. I'm a big fan of the system of designated protected origin. I've spoken about this in the past. A big fan of that process of saying that if you want to create a Melton Mowbray pork pie and call it a Melton Mowbray pork pie, it's got to be produced in a particular area. Parma ham, Camembert cheese, it's protected because there's something unique about the culture and the food heritage that determines what that product is. Otherwise, we can just churn out Camembert-like products. You go into the supermarket and you get Greek-style yogurt, or you get, you don't actually see. Actually, you can't call them this. This is the advantage of legislation and the European legislation that we're no longer part of, is to say that you can't say a Melton Mowbray style pie. It's either a Melton Mowbray pie or it's not. So it's a pork pie. You can make it in the same way, but do the ingredients originate in that place? Is the manufacturer held in that place? Do the people who create it live in that area? And so, are they using the traditional techniques? And I think it's a good analogy for our media is that we're obsessed with homogenization, centralization, and kind of control of tightly bound products, and it works very well. And the analogy I've used on many occasions, and I'll keep repeating it because I think it's worth saying, is when you're walking up and down the supermarket aisle and you're looking at the cereal, the biscuits, the crisps, you go down the frozen aisle and the pies and the pastries and the ready meals. They're all being churned out of the same factory. It's just the packaging that's different, and it's not very good for you. Excuse me. It's the UK has got the highest rate of obesity and hypertension and heart disease and diabetes in Europe because we've got the highest rate of people eating processed foods. Our media is processed media, and all we're doing is we're consuming more brand-led processed media, and I'm as guilty as anybody of this. I've got Netflix and Disney and Paramount and wherever, but it's I do also like that kind of. I'd like the opportunity to be able to consume artisan, independent, family-produced media that isn't necessarily controlled or organised by big corporations, because it's like think of it like you can buy a pack of biscuits in the supermarket and you can get them relatively cheaply, a pound or two, a couple of pound or wherever, and you get very nice, very kind of lots of people like them. Or your son or daughter can bring home some handmade biscuits that they've made at school that day, and you go, well, that they've created that, they've made that, they put their love and care and attention into that. It's not just churned out of a factory. And I think that might be the kind of polar opposites. They might be the extreme ways of thinking about this, but somewhere in the middle, community media for me is that element of kind of DIY, self-involvement, creation for yourself, not waiting for other people to produce something for you, but having the capacity to be able to make things for yourself. Now, this brings me to the issue of governance, because what you've then got to do to be a trusted form of media, and the context is really important, is this: you've got to have really good governance management processes in place. You've got to be accountable to the people that you're working with and serving. So I mean, nobody trusts our media. Our media is one of the least trusted. Double glazing, politicians, journalists. That's the bottom of the list of trusted people in society, professionals in society. However, we kind of have to work on that level of trust. We have to build that trust. We have to earn that trust. And a community media organisation is, made by people for people in their own neighbourhoods, or who have a similar connection or share a similar cultural identity, religious faith. There's a connection there between people. And what you're trying to do is make sure that people who recognise themselves in that media and that they are enabled, and remember, community radio, for example, is the only form of media that is confirmed and guaranteed in legislation that if you can take part in a community radio station, you can join that and you can be part of it. You can take part in the development of content and you can be part of the way that it's run. No other form of media has that guarantee. So it's about participation and inclusion. And that's really important and quite profound, because it changes the nature of the way that you think about how we go about producing media. And, again, it's something that Raymond Williams, argued, is that if you want to make the media more democratic, you have to deprofessionalize it. And there's an obsession, and it's like with professional approaches and professional standards. And my inclination experience is that a lot of that is down to gatekeeping. It's a lot of people who've kind of got themselves into the club. They're producing third-rate content. I mean, I said this in a conversation with some colleagues the other day, and I think I need to be more say this on a more regular basis. I think most of British radio is absolute tosh. It's rubbish. It's generic. It's regurgitated nonsense. It's just not interesting. It's like I'm walking up and down the biscuit and breakfast cereals aisle in the supermarket. The crisps, none of it interests me. Yes, it's brightly packaged. Yes, it's got a kind of gives you a hit when you use it. But is it going to set you up for the day? Is it going to leave a lasting, kind of impression with you? Is it something that you'd want to make yourself? And I think we've just really got to start being honest about these things. Is that I don't see a lot of British media. I don't watch much television. I'm more inclined to watch things on YouTube now and listen to podcasts and listen to independent community radio stations, because what I don't like is the kind of very highly processed, mass-produced, mass-marketed forms of media, in the same way that I don't really like food created in that kind of way. Anyway, that's me on my soapbox. However, let's get back to this idea of principles of good governance. And I've written a couple of blogs which are up on the Decentered Media website about this. Excuse me. And so we're looking at, one of the first things that anybody who's looking at running a community organisation, and a community organisation that is focused on media, has to think about what the organisation's purpose is. So the people who are running it have to have a clear set of aims. And you need this if you're running a mutual aid group or whether you're running a charity. You need something which kind of your mission statement, which specifies this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. And following from that, you kind of need a group of people who will take leadership about that, and that what you're prepared to do as leadership is one of those things, one of those phrases, isn't it? It's kind of bandied about, but leadership is the people who run to the ball when there's problems, and the leadership is the people who have the brave conversations and don't shy away from them. The leadership is the people who inspire and encourage other people to not be hesitant to get involved, but to recognise that the broader purpose is something worth achieving, and that's quite difficult. And it doesn't mean I'm one of the things I think very clearly that this is about building our capacity. I'm not saying that you're looking for a group of people who are going to suddenly drop into a community newspaper or a community radio station and have all of these skills. It's a process of building up people's skills and recognising their skills and assets and building that up over time. So what you're not doing is just saying, You have to be ready-made as a leader. No, this is the process by which you learn those skills, and you apply those life skills and those things that you kind of, you don't have to go on expensive management training courses. There are other things that are transferable, which give just as good a basis for engagement and learning and administrative nous and governance and accountability than other forms of so-called professional leadership might actually incur. And but what it boils down to is a kind of sense of integrity, that what you're doing is acting against a set of agreed values, and that you're approaching the purpose, the activities that you're undertaking on the basis of recognizing that everybody has a contribution to make, and that their contribution is valued, and their contribution is something which is of equal importance. It might be different, and people's capabilities at different times might not be the same. And some people might, offer more tangible benefits, but other people might offer more tacit benefits for being engaged and being part of a project. And it's just about stepping back from your own concerns and looking at people and saying, well, what is it you bring and you do? And and who is it for? Who is it about? If it's about that person, if it's about me, then that's not appropriate. That's I can do this online like this. I can do media stuff for myself, and it's all about me if I want to make it like that. But when you're in a shared situation as a community setting and it's a group, you're looking at managing that relationship between people and that integrity and trust that is built into this. So if you don't have integrity and trust in your management and governance process, how on earth would you expect listeners and readers who might just be casually engaging with your services, your activities, how would you expect them to trust and recognize the integrity that you have? So what you've got to do is make sure that there's a proper process in there for decision making, a proper process for managing risk, and a proper process for controlling the way that an organization operates. And it's not to say that this is about control freakery. It's about having a platform from which people can act with confidence and in a safe and secure way. So policies and procedures should be there to enable people, not to prevent people from undertaking the things that they want to take. They want to do. So, for example, if you're involved in community radio, you go on to do a program, and that you are aware of your responsibilities under the broadcast code, and that you have a process and a procedure for the compliance that you work with, and you make content that is interesting. But it's if there's ever a complaint made about it, then that can be dealt with on the basis that it followed correct and well-informed procedures. It's a bit like a driving test. Once you've learned to drive a car and you've passed your test, as long as you use the roads in a sensible way and in a way that respects other road users, then you've got the freedom to travel wherever you wish and at whatever time you wish. And that kind of responsibility is what really all we're trying to do, is to bring people up to the standard where they've got that kind of sense of freedom and engagement. But you need to understand what the risks are with that, and you need to understand as well that not everybody I think is there's a phrase that's constantly going through my head at the moment excuse me, which is my 2024 phrase, apart from coughing all the time. The phrase is all things being equal. Well, all things aren't equal, and we need to live in that world of recognizing where the differences are, where the disparities are, where the support is needed, where the entitlement is, that kind of thing. And what we're saying is that not everybody's an honest actor. Some people come into community radio and they want to promote themselves. Some people get involved in community radio and don't want to promote themselves at all. And it's recognizing those differences and what motivates people, but also making sure that some people don't get carried away and let themselves get running ahead, and some people who could be making a stronger contribution are able to do so because they feel confident and they trust the environment in which they're working. And that's a delicate balance, getting everybody feeling, up to a certain level where you can do what it is that you are aiming to do. Now, it might be that somebody, you get somebody to a certain level and they clearly are going to move further ahead. And that should be celebrated. And hopefully the pathways are opened for that person to go on and do and achieve bigger and brighter things. And that's a sign of success. And when you look at people's journey, this is the difference that you get with community media. But don't forget, over the years, I've been at meetings where somebody from commercial radio or the BBC comes into a room full of community radio advocates and volunteers and producers and managers and says, we love community radio. It's a skills nursery, and it gives us the opportunity to pick all your best talent. And at that point, I always really want to just stand up and say, why don't you all sod off? Because we've got people who don't want to be on that skills escalator. We have people in community radio who don't want to go and work at the BBC. Never in a million years would they want to do that. Never in a million years would they want to be opening garden fetes and comparing awards evenings because they're a local personality. They just want to give something back to their community, and they want to do it while they're doing their job, looking after their families, living with their neighbours, sharing the message of their faith, sharing the message of their politics, wherever it is. And to presume that media is all about the projection of individual personality based on the idea that that's what gets you ahead and that's what guarantees success in life. I think that community radio has shown that, we challenge that. As I say, leave your egos at the door, because there's somebody that you're sitting next to who might not be the most forthright person in public speaking, but they could be a great broadcaster or a great writer of articles or a great photographer if they're given encouragement. And it's not, but they don't have a pushy personality and they don't have a pushy ego. And it's like, that's the, the difference. As I say, when you walk into the supermarket and all the offers and the advertising and everything is trying to grab your attention and all of this is going on, and it's like, actually, let's kind of get out and go and talk to somebody who's running a little market stall and they've just started selling something that they're making at home, and or somebody's doing something online where they're doing craft or something like that. That's the equivalent, and they're not kind of in a position to overextend their personalities. Anyway, excuse me, it kind of brings us into the domain then of the kind of governance and management has to be inclusive, and it has to promote diversity and equality. And there's some pushback when you look at things on social media at the moment, and there's an awful lot of stuff about equality, diversity and inclusion as being kind of a negative thing. And I think in some circumstances, anything can be both a positive and a negative thing. It depends how it's used and how it's applied. And the element of this, which is that, there are people who are not getting a fair crack of the whip to be able to take part in something. That kind of, for me, is what the equality impact has to be thinking about. And also, that we make assumptions. Now, I'm a pragmatist on this basis. I work on the basis of looking at things on a very kind of practical basis, a pragmatic basis, and say, kind of from on a case-by-case basis as well, of really thinking it through in terms of what can be measured and what can be demonstrated. And so part of the role of the governance is to tell that story, and tell that story of change and transformation, and don't make assumptions about that. So kind of brings me to the kind of practical side of this, which is to, when we look at what the purposes of applying this kind of governance models, which is universal across most charities, civic society organisations, mutual aid groups, all that kind of thing. These aren't in any way unique. In fact, they're pretty broadly understood within society. They're just not necessarily applied often when it comes to media. So it's things like democratic participation, transparency and accountability, information dissemination, that you're actually engaged in a project which is about community development and outreach. Underpinning this is a kind of an effective financial management model. So if you're raising money from the community, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're using those resources and those donations, or those commercial activities that or semi-commercial activities that you're engaged in, you're using them well, and you're not wasting money, and you can track where it goes. And in a way, this is about building capacity for people to be able to play a role within civic society, and to play a constructive role within civic life. And whereas we have charities that are set up to do particular charitable purposes, education, environmental activities, media is one of them, which interestingly isn't often on a level playing field with other charitable activities. So I've done a lot of kind of attempts at fundraising over the years, and when it comes to community radio, it's very difficult to raise funds for. It's very difficult to raise core funds for. You've got to kind of almost work a kind of not a sleight of hand, but anybody who works in the charitable and voluntary service sector will understand this. You have to present your activities as one thing, and really what you're doing is something else, because unfortunately that's the games that professional fundraisers and professional managers of charitable and civic sector society organisations kind of have to do. They know that they need to do one thing, but the funding calls that are available are asking them to do something else. So you kind of got to figure out how to match the two, and that's a very difficult job. And people who are good fundraisers, they're like they're so rare. It's like blue zebras. They're very uncommon. You keep hold of them when you find somebody who's a good fundraiser, because they're able to match those things, and you're able to read what is being required by the funding body, so that you can address that within the purposes. When it comes to media, however, though, it's much more difficult, because gardening or heritage walks or kind of advice about health and well-being, that all kind of fits within established patterns of doing things. But we have this, here in the UK, we have this kind of mental block that if you're going to do a media-based project, like you're going to engage with people on radio or through newspaper articles about a particular topic and get them involved in the process of doing that, it somehow its value is questioned. And I know this drives me insane, because I'm trying to figure out how do we establish that notion of value, social and cultural value, for these activities, because I think they are on a par with other. So, for example, the Social Value Act, which came in 2012, I think it was, recognises that it's possible for local authorities to stipulate in tenders and tenders and development activities, that a certain amount of money that's raised or generated through that can be put to a public purpose. Typically, it's things like building a children's play park, or it could be adding value to activities, buying equipment for community groups. But we never apply that test to media. We don't really say, well, what we need in this town or this neighbourhood is a community-run newspaper, and it needs some funding to get that started, and it's labour-intensive. But it's like it's easy to build a swing park for £40,000, but it's very difficult to justify setting up a radio station or a community newspaper for the same kind of money, which is what it takes, because there's a kind of hesitancy to think about our media in these ways. And I am very happy to be wrong. This is, I want these examples. If you've got examples of where local authorities and public authorities and have done this and have used their resources to co-develop these projects, then I really want to hear about them. But at this point, and from the telescope that I'm looking through, I'm not seeing that. And I think what I'd like to see is that shift of expectation that when we talk about setting up a community project, it could be a housing development, it could be an education project, wherever it is, we ask the question, how is this going to be communicated at the beginning, not at the end? So we say, how are the people who are involved in this project, in this process, how are they going to share their story? And that's what it boils down to. One of the most powerful things that really kind of resonates, and radio, the big corporate organisations recognise this. The radio centre, kind of says this. Radio is one of the most powerful mediums for facilitating public change, social change, because it has a personal relationship with people. And it really, it works on a level which is very direct, and you can be listening to something, and if you recognise yourself in the person who you're listening to and the dialogue that's being engaged with, if you recognise yourself in that, you're more likely to go, if they can do that and make that change, I can. And that's a very powerful motivator for social change. Telling those stories, having people enabled and empowered from lots of different backgrounds, from different class structures, to look at problems and say, how did you overcome it? Or how are you dealing with it? How have you faced it? And that we don't use our media as a tool in that way. What we do is we kind of sell things to people. We give people messages, and either everything's great or wonderful, or look at this, it's all new. We don't give people media to work with as a set of practical tools where you find a sense of shared experience. So our good governance, I'm getting off the topic here, aren't I, really? Our good governance is make sure that you've got clear goals. Make sure you understand what your legal responsibilities are. Have a look at what the risk management is. Think about your degree to which you are accountable and transparent in what you do. Think about the kind of leadership you've got and how they communicate and they operate, because people are, operate in different ways and different times. In one circumstance, one type of leader can be very effective. Transplant them into another circumstance, and it just doesn't work. But you need things like good record keeping. Excuse me, good record keeping. This is what it boils down to. You need to be able to demonstrate that you are complying with laws and regulations, that you've got ways to handle complaints, that you can think about how your internal and external communications are handled, and that you've also got a sense you can kind of look at and consider the benefits or the challenges of your circumstances. What are the risks? What's the financial constraints? How much expertise have you got? What's the kind of turnover rate of your volunteers? What kind of regulation do you need to, if you're a broadcaster, you have to work within the broadcast, an Ofcom regulated one, you have to work within the Ofcom regime. What's the danger of poor management? Have you got the infrastructure in place? Have people got the skills to engage with this? And it's this is, we say, those of us in community media have been around for a while, always say, think about this as 10% media and 90% community development, because it's about building people's skills and capacity. And along the way, we can maybe produce some interesting content. Right, I've been rattling on, and I think I've probably used up all of my coughing tokens. I've given you a good selection of coughs over the last 40 minutes or so. I hope you'll see some improvement over the coming weeks. I'm not feeling tired, so I'm probably not going to have an afternoon nap, which is a shame because I'd really really get into the habit of that. But I'm in my winter mode. Anyway, if you want to find out more information, go to the website, which is decentered.co.uk. If you want to help me on, you can support the work that I do through Patreon, which is go to patreon.com/decenteredmedia, and you can join, and I'm trying to reconfigure what the kind of benefits are of, we do a fortnightly drop in. I do the podcasts, I do the blogs, and I was kind of thinking, what's the benefit that somebody gets from? You get to listen to me whittle on, but that might be a benefit, It's, but we also, it's kind of it really does enable me to kind of keep pushing away at this, and also to feel that there are other people out there who, kind of are interested in similar things as well. And I want this year to really be about that dialogue of, I think, the social purpose, the need, and this is something I want to move into really thinking about is, we're crying out for change and transformation in this country, and the basis in which we've allowed laissez-faire and market-driven ideas to take over and run our communities and run our culture, of kind of, I think the feeling is that they've reached the end of the road. But what we don't want to do is just hand that over to state-run organisations. We want somewhere in the middle, which is the community-driven and the purposeful, mutual civic society organisations to have a strong voice in this. And that's where I'm pragmatic. I'm not against the market. I'm not against the state doing things. But in the middle, there's a relationship to be had between, kind of people getting together and organising for themselves and as part of a devolved agenda. But we need to be able to say that we do it well, and we do it for the right reasons and with a strong sense of purpose. So follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Mastodon, Threads, and it's usually at Decentered Media. I think it's consistent across all of those. But if I'm sure there's another one, Facebook or wherever. I'm sure LinkedIn. That's the next challenge, is to get to really start using LinkedIn effectively. So send me a message if you hear this, and I will pick it up and follow it up. It would be great to organise some discussions and conversations that we can share as well. Really looking for a kind of participative angle. It's what I'm focused on is that kind of sense of positive social change, and let's think about the practicalities that we need to build up, the capacity that we need to build up to do this job properly. Until next time, thank you very much. You've been listening to the Decentered Media podcast with me, Rob Watson. To find out more, go to decentered.co.uk or follow on Twitter and Instagram at Decentered Media.